Hello, and thank you very much for coming along this evening. This evening, in fact, we're very privileged here in Cambridge to have a person who's running for political office join us and explain to us his platform and how it relates to a whole series of things in our environment. It's John Pitkin is joining us, and I've known him for at least 10 years, maybe 15, going back into organizing citizen action on climate change. I've been very impressed with his capacity to bring people together. In fact, he was the organizing principle behind the citywide forum on climate change that was held a few years ago with experts coming in from all over and explaining what's about to happen in terms of climate change, sea level rise, river flow, and the like. People like engineers from over at Tufts that came and spoke to us. And others who then focused on the social impact of climate change. So I've been very impressed with his work over the years, and I think it's important that we hear straight from him what he proposes as an elected member, if he becomes one, of the City Council. So here's John to talk about it.
Thank you very much for having me, Tim, and thank you for watching. I'm glad to have a chance to spend a few minutes with you this afternoon talking about my background and what I propose to bring to the City Council. I combine almost 50 years of experience working with Cambridge's government with a commitment to systematic, concrete climate action. But first I want to tell you about how I got here, about that 50 years of experiences, some of the highlights of that bear on why I decided to run for City Council this year. I'm retired. I'm a former demographer specializing in housing and immigration, and have been an active citizen since moving to Cambridge in 1970. I first got involved during an earlier transportation crisis. The city had been under plans of the construction of an interstate highway right through the city, north to south, through more or less where we're sitting today at the CCTV offices. And that plan had been on the books since 1950 and was a very live proposal in the late 1960s when the state received $3.5 billion to build what was known as the Inner Belt. The city rose up and marched, and some large fraction of the population marched to Boston to stop it in protest. The Governor Sargent wisely sent the money back to Washington. $3.5 billion was a lot of money in those days. There was a transportation crisis because there was no plan B, and the city came up with a new model for citizen participation to make sure that the transportation planners would listen to citizens before they came up with major proposals, such as the Inner Belt that would run through neighborhoods. That model was known as the Cambridge Transportation Forum, and it was instituted by the City Council that first asked the city manager to implement it in 1972. He didn't act on it, and the City Council itself passed a resolution and did it themselves in 1973, and I was invited into that process as a new resident of Cambridge before I was 30 years old, and I wound up chairing it, the Transportation Forum. It worked for 2 years, and it provided well-informed, active citizens of ample opportunity to comment on major transportation proposals that were such as the extension of the Red Line from Harvard Square to Alewife that we have today, is what the alignment would be and the design of that, as well as Cambridge's compliance with the Clean Air Transportation Control Plan that led to the residents' parking sticker program, and improvements to the bus routes, the availability of bus schedules to passengers. I worked with a number of other young people who were brought into the City Hall at that time. We had staff support, and we led and we were in charge. Basically, the young interns from MIT and citizens on the forum were in charge of what happened, and we had regular monthly meetings. We had input from all the neighborhoods through their neighborhood associations, and it was a model for very robust citizen participation. As a result of that, I became, that role, I was actually later appointed to be on the Cambridge Board of Traffic and Parking, that had oversight over the traffic director, citizen oversight over the traffic director. That board has since been dismantled, and the traffic director now has no direct input from citizens and is more or less out of touch with the citizens. And that's part of what the city has forgotten over the years, and as part of my biography. I also was involved with the Cambridge Democratic City Committee, of which I became chair in 1975. So I was kind of a fast starter in citizen activism, and I actually stepped back a bit from that. I focused on my neighborhood association in mid-Cambridge, which I helped to found. I wrote the bylaws and became president, and have been a board member ever since. In 1997, I was the first signer of a citywide downzoning petition that would have controlled some of the excessive, what I believe is excessive commercial development that's occurred in Kendall Square and elsewhere in the city, that has created a lot of the problems that we're dealing with today in terms of housing and gentrification. In 1997, I was the first signer of the Pitkin petition, which was a citywide downzoning petition. And then in 2001, I ran for city council. I lost. I nearly got on, but I missed by 60 votes getting on, and I went on to other things. Since then, I've primarily been active as an environmentalist. My main activities have been through Green Cambridge in Cambridge. More recently with the Inman Square Climate Action Team, a very small scale effort in mid-Cambridge that's focused on Inman Square. But on a citywide basis, in 2009, I was one of the organizers of the City Council's declaration of a climate emergency, which was a very early declaration for a government. And that led to the 2009-2010 first Cambridge Climate Congress that I succeeded in with a small group of people in Green Cambridge in instituting and getting working with Mayor Denise Simmons and city staff to put on in City Hall, that involved 100 citizens in learning a lot more about climate change and what's in store, and hearing from scientists, as well as developing a menu of proposals for city action. The follow-through for that was problematic. We didn't have anything like the Transportation Forum to carry forward the recommendations. It's also involved with the starting the Net Zero Connolly petition of 2012 that was passed, and it's led to the plan for Net Zero, as well as the 2016 Cambridge Climate Congress that Tim attended. And I've since been active with the Sierra Club, in which in 2018 I organized with Biodiversity for a Livable Climate, a forum on revitalizing ecosystems in Greater Boston to survive climate change. If you had asked me at that time, or even a year ago, if I would ever run for city council again, I would have suggested that you get your head examined. So what happened? Why did I decide at the tender age of 75 to throw my hat in the ring to run for city council after a hiatus of 18 years? The answer has to do with what's been happening in Inman Square. It's my neighborhood. I live a block from Inman Square. And as the result of another traffic engineer scheme, not of the same scale as the inner belt, but at one that was entirely determined by a city's traffic engineer, the city has a plan to redesign Inman Square by running Hampshire Street through Vellucci Plaza Park, which has already been largely destroyed for the plan. We are still, with friends of Inman Square and neighbors in a group of neighbors, we are still opposing that in court. So I'm willing to fight the city if it makes a mistake. It did not follow its own laws and have a review by the planning board to get any citizen oversight of the traffic director. But as the result of that, I spent a lot of time in the past year in City Hall, and what I saw was that our young city councilors, of which there are a number, don't have an understanding of how our system of government provides for real democratic control, council control over what happens in the city, And there is something, what I consider to be a democracy crisis in City Hall, is that the system is not working very well. In fact, the council is bogged down. It's not able to get recommendations from the administration that it can act on such things as the affordable housing overlay proposal, or in fact on many of the climate issues that I care so deeply about and that are so urgent. The council is bogged down in just too acrimonious and divisive disputes about proposals that should have been vetted and publicly aired before they reach the council. And the result is they're inundated with complaints and objections and sometimes very often helpful suggestions about what should be done, but the city council cannot micromanage a city the size of Cambridge. It's 9 city councilors, and we need to understand that we have a very weak form of democracy in Cambridge, and the councilors must work together to ensure that there is citizen input in a timely manner so that the proposals are well vetted by the public as well as the administration before major proposals are made, so that people will back them. We've seen many examples of how this has failed. For example, the citizens' petition for municipal broadband never even came to the council after a task force recommended it. And the city council hasn't even been able to pass a ban of leaf blowers. Hasn't been able to muster the political support for that. There are ways that this can be done. I believe that we could use the model of very much like something along the lines of the transportation forum that was disbanded and not continued. And I don't believe it necessarily should have been continued, but the model should have been kept, and it has not been used for years. And the oversight of the citizen involvement and oversight of the administration and the city staff is very weak, and the staff, when they do conduct citizen participation, go through an exercise that many people consider to be a participatory patina. It does not involve genuine response and listening to citizens. I have a platform of proposals, specific proposals to do this next year that a majority of the council could implement if it so chooses. And I believe that if I'm on the council, I could work with a majority of councilors to put these into effect and to improve citizen participation in a way that would lead to much greater and more effective action on climate change and the other urgent challenges that the city faces in the area of transportation. We have a different kind of a transportation crisis today than we had after the inner belt was not built, but we have congestion on the streets, competition between modes and conflicts between modes such as bicycles, pedestrians, and cars that is hazardous for cyclists and pedestrians alike, and we don't have a model for dealing with that. And this is not a problem that can be solved by experts alone in City Hall, but requires robust democratic citizen participation in order to deal with that problem.
Well, there you have it in a way. I mean, this is your candidate for, in effect, a whole series of things, including everything from transportation right through global climate change. And it seems to me that the history, the record of achieved events, and in fact very important events that have made it onto the agenda of City Council already because of his citizen action is really quite extraordinary and deserves your attention. You can get access to further parts of it, as I'm sure I'll give you links at the end, but just to review some of it in the past. He was, as I say, a key activator of this Green Cambridge and Citizen Climate Action Plan back in 2016. In fact, that's where he got some of his attention online. You probably looked it up. If you didn't, you can find it on Transition Studies now, and just click on the link and go out to the webcast that was made available on it. And this was back in March of 2017. It was broadcast interviews and the like. But
really
basically,
stepped up and was doing a
you can
tremendous
see
amount.
that some of this has already been established as a record that you should make reference to as you consider him for a counselor. The other kinds of things he's done is link sort of local citizen action to national and international issues. And climate action is something that you can demand on a national level, but you really have much more effect if you're demanding it on a local level. You can get people to at least be embarrassed about what they're not doing if you can't get them to act on what they should be doing. And eventually you want them to act on what they should be doing. This kind of thing of rethinking Boston by the sea is crucial when it comes to the fact that sea level's rising. Guess what? Not just on the Boston side of the Charles River, but on this side of the Charles River. And although we've had programs before on rethinking Boston by the sea, perhaps it's time to call upon well-elected councilors like John to think about Cambridge by the sea, because most of Cambridgeport will be underwater very quickly if we had a Category 3 hurricane that overtopped the dam down at the Science Center. So it's really a matter of urgency that you start informing yourself about what he has done and what he proposes to do as a new counselor. Back to you, John.
Thank you, Tim. My proposals are to, well, first, near the top of my list of proposals is to have another climate congress that would be backed up by an ongoing climate forum to follow up for a year or two after a climate congress on the current challenges of climate action in order to get citizens involved in ongoing climate action and to support action that with the city, such as the list is very long. There are dozens of things that we need to consider doing, and we need the political will to do them, from maintaining our tree canopy of trees to which is in decline and that we need to survive not only in a changing climate and in order to mitigate summer heat and as well as flooding threats, to energy efficiency in existing buildings. That is a missing piece of the net zero action plan. We need to we can be moving much faster on that by mobilizing some of our local resources and our manpower, our workforce, to retrofit existing buildings and reduce energy consumption as we transition to renewables, because we still need energy efficiency is just as important as the transition, because it's reducing the total greenhouse gas emissions that is key. We also need to be preparing for extreme weather events, which is another thing that we need to be considered in a new climate congress, followed on by a forum that would involve young people, bring young people of the Sunrise generation. If I'm on the city council, I want to make City Hall become a center of democracy, not of corporate influence as it is now, with the influence of developers and development being the tops on the agenda. I want to see citizens having a major presence in City Hall in setting the agenda, and having young people of the Sunrise generation involved in a new climate forum, in a forum on our tree canopy, on how citizens can be involved in that. We have an urban forest task force that's delivering a master plan that we are going to need to implement, and citizen backing is going to be essential for that. So there's going to be a role for citizens there. And I think we need another Cambridge Transportation Forum to deal with the issues on our streets, including the transition to non-greenhouse, or towards transportation modes that use no greenhouse gases, whether electric vehicles, bicycles, or public transportation, electric buses. We need to be actively figuring out the best path forward and having input from the neighborhoods and all the communities and all generations to understand this complex transitions very quickly. Al Gore has said that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. We have to go far. We also need to go fast, but we need to be together, and we need to start working soon to do this. My proposals are what I call democratic environmentalism. We need something that is informed by science, but also has the inspiration of the young generations and the movements whose lives are most affected by climate change and all the other urgent challenges, part of the process in City Hall. The City Council can make this happen. I ask for your support, because I think this is the only way we can deal with these problems in time to make the difference and to do the best we can so that young generations will have a livable world and a livable city for as long as possible. So thank you for your consideration. I welcome you to visit my website at www.johnpitkin.org and subscribe to my email newsletter if you'd like to stay in touch.
Okay, well, let's in fact try to get that website up here in front of people so they can see it. It's www. I'll put it down right while we're here.
johnpitkin.org. And
okay. Well, here we are.
Yeah, and you can stop in and visit me at my office. I have a campaign office in the middle of Inman Square. Check the hours before you come. They'll be on my website.
But there you are.
Yeah.
And we're very fortunate to have had your presentation here, because it seems to me that you've got a more comprehensive view of the ecological crisis than many who have even specialized on it in academic circles. They've never faced this question of transportation and housing and global climate shifts like sea level rise and the like. So we're very fortunate indeed that you came along today. And we'll be looking forward to, in effect, getting in touch with you as we approach the election, which is on what date, and how should people, in fact, be set up for it? Is it too late to register?
The registration deadline has passed.
I see.
It was just a week ago. The date is Tuesday, November 5th. And if you're going to be out of town, you can get an absentee ballot.
There you go.
Before then.
So if you're registered, get over there and vote, or get an absentee ballot and get it in, because this is our last best chance in many respects.
Yeah.
So we'll be looking at this in future weeks after the election, in part to keep track of whether John's been elected or not, but take a look at it, because if human civilization is to survive, leaders must learn about the limits of a finite ecosystem. Fortunately, people like John and others are forming a new kind of citizen science alliance that is emerging around the world to work together to devise a just transition to a sustainable future. Thank you very much, John, for coming along.
Thank you. Thank you, Tim. It was a pleasure.
Okay, we'll keep in touch with these things. As I say, after the election, we'll see if John's got elected. And if not, we'll take his whole program and present it to whoever did get elected and say, listen, this is what you should be about. Thank you very much for coming along.